Hi, I'm Dave Price, and this is Inside Iowa Politics. This week, we look at water. Droughts, weather challenges, chemicals from agricultural runoff, and growing populations, those are all factors that make us think more about our water supply. There is a new Central Iowa water entity that could provide a blueprint for other parts of our state. It's called Central Iowa Water Works. It'll provide drinking water to about 600,000 residents, essentially a drinking water wholesaler. There will be a dozen area smaller water entities joining this new regional concept instead of each one of them trying to do its own thing when it comes to production. Now, there were dozens of conversations, arguments, brainstorming, disagreements, and political battles, but they finally got this done.
We didn't try to value the bricks and mortar and the pipes and valves when we went into this thing this time. We tried to value the capacity remaining in our collective systems to provide additional water. That's what people need. That's what they want, is the water. They don't want the bricks or the pipes. And so we went down the path of putting a value on that. What is that worth? And that was an interesting exercise, but it turned into a real key point here in that we were able to come up with a way to value that water that everyone agreed with. And we didn't have to argue about, well, what's a 100-year-old treatment plant worth? It still works, but it's 100 years old. And what is a newer plant worth?
Everybody has a seat at the table. We had kind of pitched maybe a shorter governing board, but I think ultimately everybody wanted a chance to be at that table and have a say in the direction of our future. And so now that we have a fully representative board, I think that has brought a lot of comfort to some of our smaller entities that have joined, that they have a voice too.
And so the concern was that the bigger entities were going to control everything?
I think there was a concern over who's going to drive the ship, right? And so, this is a change in approach. Des Moines Waterworks, because they've been the wholesale supplier, has been making those decisions as the wholesale supplier. And so the shift is now a representative board is making those decisions and responsible for all the water that's produced here in the metro, at least those that are participating.
How is our supply here? I'm looking at some of the issues they're having in the western part of the country. California has a lot of stuff going on. Utah has had some issues. Texas, in our region, of course, we've had the better part of 3 years in drought. How is our supply right now? And we get a good bit of rain over the last week, fortunately, but where are we?
I would say that we're in a good position here today, this year. In some drought conditions, there's still subsoil moisture levels are low. We rely on that to charge the rivers when it's dry. But I would frame it this way. We're blessed here in Central Iowa with typically abundant water. We've got two rivers, the Des Moines and the Raccoon. They provide typically an abundant supply. But if the last 3 years have taught us anything, they've taught us that water supply is not infinite, and it needs to be managed appropriately to ensure that we all do have the water that we need. And it's exactly one of the reasons that we wanted to do this regional initiative, is so that we are all working together to manage those supplies instead of competing for them.
What do you anticipate going forward now that this exists? What will be the most challenging aspects of this?
I think on a grand scale, ensuring that we have the capacity that we need. The metro is one of the fastest growing metros in the country. And we're going to have to grow the capacity, the amount of water that we're able to produce. I think that will be one of our biggest challenges, just getting that done on the time frame that we need to get it done on. And then I also anticipate there will be a million little details that we weren't expecting. Some of these properties that we want to transfer to Central Iowa Waterworks under this joint ownership, some of them are owned by the federal government, as an example. And it's always more complicated to transfer the rights in something that's owned by someone else, and especially if it's the federal government. And so there are going to be little things like that we're going to have to get over every one of those hurdles here in the next 6 months to a year. But we've got a lot of momentum now and a lot of people behind this thing. So I'm optimistic that we'll get through all of those things.
Do people get how much focus we all should probably have on our water supply?
A lot of people don't know where their water comes from. They don't think about it. They turn on the tap and the water comes out every day. I like to think we've done a great job of making water available to people on a day-to-day basis in a way they don't have to think about it. And so I don't think people, put it in the context of climate change or global warming or the changes that you see in precipitation patterns and what effect that might have. But we certainly think about that. And we're trying to keep tabs on, what are the expected changes in the Midwest, and what can we expect to see 20 years from now or 50 years from now, and what amount of water do we need to plan for so that our communities do have enough. We have abundant water, but it's not infinite, and we need to manage it properly.
I think the word that Ted's touching on is resiliency. We're responsible for building resilient systems. And that's exactly what Central Iowa Waterworks will allow us to do, is build an even more resilient system for here in the metro. We have to be thinking almost a decade ahead about what our needs for this community are going to be, just because it takes so long between permitting, design, implementation, getting all that infrastructure in place so that it's ready when we need that water to be treated or when we need that source water. And Ted's right. We've got to think about what the climate is going to look like. We're certainly going to circle. We may not be out of a drought yet. And we're going to circle through times of drought or even flood. And so you have to think about resiliency from a lot of different perspectives, both in times where you have not enough water or an abundance of water. And so that's what CIWW will help us do, is build a more resilient system.
Time now for the final five, and we stick to water. Number one, utility companies. They can provide an example about how regional entities can work together like they will with water for this new Central Iowa Waterworks. Number two, there are a dozen of these local entities that are part of this now, but they've set this up so that other communities can join later. By the way, communities are responsible for setting their own water rates. Number three, regional strength. This doesn't mean that water rates will go down in the area. However, they hope that as a united front, they can have better conversations with the congressional delegation, for example, as they try to seek federal funding. Number four, water lawsuit. Now, this is a touchy subject, but several years back, the former head of the Des Moines Water Works had sued because of the high costs his system had to remove the nitrates from the drinking water. Those nitrates came downstream from some agricultural operations in northern counties. It angered a lot of people, this lawsuit, but big picture, some people believe that this potentially got conversations going, and maybe that helped to make people think differently about this Central Iowa regional water system. Finally, number five, water shortage. Fortunately, most communities in Iowa right now have plentiful water. It's not like it is out west in some states like Texas and Oklahoma, Utah, California, where they've had water shortages. Having said that, Clark County, which is south of the Des Moines metro, they have had water shortages there. Big issue there they've tried to work their way through. So it's a reminder for decision makers across this state that they will need to think about plentiful and safe water supplies for the decades ahead. Thanks for joining us for Inside Iowa Politics.